Namaste and welcome to Detours with me, Anuradha Goyal, where I talk to some very interesting personalities about journeys of all kinds. Today, we are going to go on a journey of Indian Railways. It's actually the journey of Indian trains, which enable a lot of our journeys. And we have Shri R. Anantji with us, who is a Indian Railways Account Services Officer. And I know him through his social media, through his Twitter handle, on which he shares lovely images of Indian Railways with lovely tidbits and information about the heritage and history of Indian Railways. So I requested him to come on Detours and share it with all our listeners. Anantji, welcome to Detours.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on this podcast. So, let's get going.
Okay, so Anantji, let's start with the history of Indian Railways. Tell us which are the oldest railway lines in India. We know that today we have a huge network, but this network came up in bits and pieces, enabled by a lot of kings and a lot of the patronage from different people. So tell us which are the oldest railway lines in India.
Yeah, so the oldest railway line, as we know, is the line which was in the earlier Great Indian Peninsular Railway, which was the first company to start building the railway line.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first built from Boribandar to Thana, or a distance of about 32 kilometers. That service started on April 16th, 1853. So that was the first railway line which came up. Second one which came up was on the east from Howrah. Yes, from Howrah and up to Hooghly. So that line came up exactly on August 15th, coincidentally, 1854. It was about a year and 4 months after this line, after the first line came into being.
Okay. So it came in the east coast and west coast of India in a way.
Absolutely, because Bombay was coming out of the financial center of East India Company, and Calcutta was already the political and administrative capital of East India Company.
Right. And these were all small lines, 20-30 kilometers.
Yeah, initially, yes.
Yes.
But East Indian Railway, actually, they spread faster because the landscape is more of a plain landscape.
Okay.
Though there are rivers to be bridged, but they sort of laid the railway lines along the rivers.
Okay.
So that they didn't have to cross. But here, the western side, it took time because they had to cross the Ghats.
Okay.
So once they crossed Kalyan and then they had to spread, then you had to cross the Ghats. So there they took quite a bit of time. In fact, Pune they could reach only in 1860.
Okay.
So that took time. In fact, there is an interesting account. East India Railway and Great Indian Peninsular Railway, they sort of had an informal race as to who would build the first line. So what happened was, it was actually East Indian Railway, because Calcutta was a administrative center of the East India Company at that time. It could have started the first railway service. So, but what happened was two twin tragedies took place. What happened? One of the trains, one of the ships which was carrying the locomotives, it got misdirected to Australia.
Okay.
And the another ship which was carrying the coaches, that sank at a place called Sandheads near the Calcutta port.
Okay.
So because of this, the whole thing was delayed by about a year. They had to get that ship redirected to India. That took quite a few months, and then these coaches had to be locally, assembled.
Okay.
And that's why it took about a year, 4 months to get the railway line started from Howrah.
So otherwise, originally we would have had the first line in Calcutta instead of.
Maybe. I mean, it could have. I mean, at least the gap wouldn't have been 1 year, 4 months. Like it would have been within a few days or within a few weeks apart. Both the railway lines could have commenced their operations.
Oh, great! This is an
So that was a race. I mean, they were in competition, right? I mean, because they were both independent railway companies. The Great Indian Independent Railway and the East Indian Railway were independent companies racing to have the first railway line in place in India.
So after these two, which were the other main railway lines that?
Then the one in around Madras came up.
Okay.
The railway line from Rayapuram to Walaja Road.
How long would that be?
That came up in 1856. That was a little longer. It would be about 70 to 80 kilometers at least.
Okay.
So that came up, but we have to. The unique thing about this railway line is that the station building was constructed before the train commenced before the railway operations commenced from Rayapuram.
So CST came up later.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this station, which is Rayapuram station, is the oldest station in the Indian subcontinent and one of the oldest stations in Asia.
That is interesting. So the first railway line came up in Mumbai, but the first station came up in Madras.
First station, yeah. I mean, a station means a station as a permanent building.
Right.
Like what was there in Boribandar or what was there in Howrah, they were all temporary sheds.
Right.
So these are all temporary sheds, but the major station building as such, that in Rayapuram, and after that the railway service started. So Rayapuram has now got the oldest station building.
Okay.
That station building still stands. I mean, it is a fairly good shape after we have taken steps to conserve it a bit. Still an old station building which still stands.
Wow, interesting.
While the CST came up in 1888 and the Howrah station came up in the end of 19th century, almost around 1900. It was completed around 1900. Of course, there were far bigger buildings.
Right.
Howrah station is bigger than CST.
Right.
CST came up as administrative offices. I mean, the headquarters of Great Indian Peninsular Railway was there, and station was just an extension of the building.
Right. So after we had Calcutta, Madras, Mumbai, which were essentially the three cities where British had lot of focus on, which are the other, how did the rest of India start?
Then I think construction came up everywhere. I mean, then, the East Indian Railway, it progressed quite rapidly. Then the railway line around, then the Punjab Sindh Railway, that was, around Lahore. Railway lines came up around Lahore around late 1850s.
Okay.
And then this line from Calcutta, that was taken right up to Delhi in 1866.
Okay. We are
and
still
then
using the same line.
Yeah, the Calcutta, which is the same line via Allahabad, Mughal Sarai, Allahabad, right up to from Kanpur and to Delhi. That reached Delhi around 1866.
Okay.
It had reached much earlier, but because you had to cross the Yamuna, they had to construct a bridge.
Right.
Bridges was the ones which were taking time, obviously, because it would have a financial element, and it was also time consuming to construct the bridges.
And a technology.
Oldest, biggest bridge was the bridge over the river Son.
In Bihar.
Near Ara. So the Son river was the first to be bridged.
Okay.
Then Yamuna in Allahabad, and then the Yamuna in Delhi.
Okay, so these are the three oldest railway bridges.
These are the three oldest bridges which were constructed.
So I'm just repeating for our listeners. So the three oldest railway bridges are near Ara on the Son River, and then on Yamuna at Allahabad or Prayagraj, and in Delhi.
Yes, I mean these are the major bridges.
Yes.
Major bridges in the sense that they were almost about at least more than half a kilometer long.
Right. So that leads me to the question that lot of princely states were also funding their own railways. So can you tell us a bit about them?
The princely state, actually, the first princely state which actually took the initiative was the Gaikwads of Baroda. The Gaikwads of the Baroda, they took up this line, and there is an interesting context as to why they took up this line as well.
Yeah.
Because as in 1861, the American Civil War started. Because Civil War disrupted the supply of cotton from from US to Britain. Now, the Gaikwads of Baroda, the Baroda region was rich in cotton. They grew a lot of cotton.
Yes.
So now he wanted to get a lot of revenue for his cotton by exporting it to England.
Okay.
But he had no fast way of transporting cotton to the ports.
Okay.
So which means that they had to lay a railway line. So what they decided was that ultimately, if you look through, I mean, I have some records of which the financial advisors who were there in the court of Maharaja of Baroda, they that laying a broad gauge line would be very expensive.
Okay.
After all, the princely states had the limitations of resources. They were not as powerful as the Indian government, British Indian government. They didn't have resources. So they said that you should go in for a narrow gauge.
Okay.
And also because the main material which was to be moved was cotton.
Right.
Cotton wasn't. Cotton is a light product.
And it can take any shape.
And it can take, and you can. It didn't put that kind of pressure on the track.
Right.
So they said that you can use narrow gauge lines to take to the port at Surat.
Right.
Surat, it can go. The ships can take it to England. Now there is an interesting photograph which can be seen. Which the listeners can actually go to the Churchgate. The Western Railway headquarters in Churchgate. Where there is a heritage gallery. You can see an interesting photograph of the bulls pulling a few wagons carrying cotton on a railway track.
Right.
Which meant that the Gaikwad, he was in a great hurry to get this train services commissioned because time was running out. It was already 1861, 62, 63. I think 1863 had already come, and the locomotives which he had ordered from England wasn't arriving.
Right.
That was because the gauge was different. Obviously, they had to change the specifications were different. So there was a delay in manufacturing of these locomotives in England, and it was taking time. So what he did was he designed his own wagons. He devised the bulls to carry the wagons. And these were, jocularly referred to as the bull motives. Instead of the locomotives, they were referred to as the bull motives.
Because they were pulled by a bull.
Yeah, it's a very interesting exhibit which can be seen in Churchgate, the Western Railway Heritage Gallery in Churchgate. So that is one thing.
And it's a very classic case of a jugaad, if I can say, of a jugaad innovation, when the business needs, a mode of transportation, and you can't keep the customer waiting, and you can't keep the product with you, and you somehow do that. And I remember, if I'm right, visiting a museum, a railway museum in Dabhoi, in Gujarat, where there is a documentation of this line.
Yes. And this particular, after all, even he was a Gujarati Maharaja, Gujarati's sense of business, the business sense of Gujarati is very strong.
It's the highest priority in their life.
Yes, the revenue gets a lot of priority.
Yes.
So starting from there, then the Nizam started his services in 1870s, and the Mysore Maharaja started his service in 1880s.
Yeah, I remember the Hyderabad train. If I'm not wrong, Hyderabad to Ajmer was the longest running train for a long
Yes,
time.
yes. And Hyderabad took up this meter gauge. Hyderabad, Nizam of Hyderabad laid it in meter gauge. So you could see right from Hyderabad, the line of Nizam went up to Khandwa.
In MP.
In MP. It went up to Aurangabad. From Aurangabad, it went to Akola up to Khandwa. And then it got connected to the Holkar's railway line, which took it to, through Mau in
Near Indore.
Indore. And then from Indore, it went up to Mahoba and joined a meter gauge line in Rajasthan. And from it went up to Ajmer. So
Right.
anyone who wanted to go on a pilgrimage from Hyderabad used to take this meter gauge train from Hyderabad right up to Ajmer.
Right. So what I'm also gathering is that when these lines were commissioned by different people, they chose their own gauge. Somebody chose narrow gauge, somebody chose meter gauge, somebody chose a broad gauge. So and that's why you have to now work on synchronizing this whole network on a single gauge.
Yes, and ultimately as we developed and as our communication needs increased, our transport needs increased, leisure tourism, railway, people had to travel to places of tourist interest. So the travel needs, as they increased, they realized that this different kind of gauges which were there, it was an impediment to smooth transport of not just the people but even the goods and services.
Yes.
The goods, the freight. The freight is actually the bread and butter of Indian Railways. I mean,
Right.
2% of our revenues come from freight. So
How
now
much can you repeat that? How much of your revenue comes from freight?
it's about 63 to 64% revenues come from freight,
Right.
about 30% from passengers.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing, because ultimately, what used to happen was if you had to transport from a broad gauge this thing to a meter gauge destination, then obviously the freight had to be unloaded and reloaded into a meter gauge wagons.
Right. Right.
All these things increase the cost of transportation.
Yeah, so I remember as a student, I used to travel a lot from Chandigarh to Aurangabad, where my father was posted, and I had to, change the train at Manmad and wait for long hours because of this gauge difference.
I remember when we were posted. My father was posted in Assam, in near Dimapur. That is Dimapur is in Nagaland, but my father was Cement Corporation of India. When we had to come down south, we had to change over at Bongaigaon.
Right.
Meter gauge, and from Bongaigaon we had to take the broad gauge line and come over to Calcutta and then take the train down south. So this used to be there were different gauges in operation. Basically three gauges in operation. You had the broad gauge, meter gauge, and a narrow gauge.
Right.
And like you have a narrow gauge museum of the Gaikwads of Baroda in Dabhoi, another narrow gauge museum which has come up in Nagpur.
Okay.
Which is because the Nagpur Chhattisgarh railway also was a narrow gauge railway which had come up in the 1870s.
Okay.
Now what happened was that railway was laid because of the compulsion of famines, because there were 1860s and 70s there were a lot of famines in central India which caused a lot of loss to life and livelihood.
Okay.
So because of that, it was the central provinces. It was the first instance of a provincial government forming the railway company to speed up the transportation of grains.
Right.
And because provincial government had its own limitations in terms of finances, it took to narrow gauge.
Right. So is narrow gauge substantially lower in cost to
install? Yeah, it becomes 1/3.
Okay.
Almost 1/3.
Okay.
The cost becomes almost 1/3.
Okay.
Now, amount of land you require,
Yes.
comes down. So all this, because of all these factors, narrow gauge is a substantial costs a lot less, and
Faster to build.
and it depends upon how many people you want to transport. Suppose your needs are you don't have a good forecast of the number of passengers and want to transport, then you keep the narrow gauge line.
Right.
So you had a huge narrow gauge line from Jabalpur to Gondia, and it used to connect to Chhindwara. From Nagpur to Jabalpur was a very long line which used to go to Chhindwara, Shivni, and then it used to meet at Nainpur and then go up to Jabalpur.
Okay.
Nowadays you can drive to Jabalpur from Nagpur in 4 hours, but overnight journey by narrow gauge. And I have gone used that railway line, not up to Jabalpur. I have gone up to Shivni, but it's not a very comfortable journey, but it was an overnight journey.
And then you have this beautiful Himalayan railways, and then you have hill railways. You have in Darjeeling, you have Shimla Kalka, you have Nilgiri Hills. Can you talk a little bit? They are a UNESCO World Heritage Site in themselves.
Yes,
now.
the first line I think which came up was the Darjeeling one.
Yes.
That came up in the 1880s.
Right.
The famous technique which they used to get over the huge gradient in
yes
on the Darjeeling Hill Railway was the use of a Z curve.
Right.
And many of our tourists who want to take the Darjeeling Hill Railway train will notice this Z curve, a very unique innovation of overcoming the
gradient.
Negotiating the gradient. Yes. Instead of taking the loops.
Yes.
They would go onto a curve and then reverse onto a curve and then accelerate and go up again.
Right.
They cannot to curve around that place is not the locomotive power isn't sufficient.
Yeah, even the Ghoom loop itself is a innovation.
The Ghoom loop is an innovation because they had to sort of reverse at that place.
Right.
But Batasia loop, as it is called now.
Batasia. Yes.
It's of course earlier it was a place, it was a good marketplace and all, but now the whole area has been beautified very well.
Even now, I went 3-4 years back, and even now, after the train passes, the people put up the shops on the railway line itself. And it's such a beautiful experience to see people walking and just stopping for 2 minutes to let the train pass.
I went to the place last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a war memorial in place, and that area has been beautifully landscaped. There are no markets now. People selling wares in a very organized manner. There may be hawkers around that place, but I come to this. There is a beautiful museum in Ghoom which has been set. Now, Ghoom Museum, a small museum. It contains a lot of artifacts of the Darjeeling Hill Railway.
Yes.
It contains the signal lamps which are used, other equipment which were used at that time, and it also has an outdoor element to the museum as well. Narrow gauge wagons which are no longer in use. The old locomotives, they have all been kept in a yard outside. You can have a look at them. That is also very.
So to me, Darjeeling, a ride on the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway is like time travel and see how Indian Railways was, and to visualize how, and it still baffles me that almost 150 years back they could connect railways so well.
True, absolutely true. And actually, in the Ghoom Railway Museum, one interesting artifact is an account by Mark Twain.
Yes.
Sorry, not Mark Twain. I'm sorry.
Mark Twain did travel on.
Was it Mark Twain or Rudyard Kipling? One of these.
Mark Twain. Mark Twain,
right? Yeah, I remember. Yes, Mark Twain. Interesting account of the journey of to Darjeeling. By Mark Twain, the quote of it is, there as an exhibit over there.
Yes. yes.
So that's an interesting thing.
Even your Kangra railways, you know, there is a beautiful.
I'll come to that, but Kangra is the newest actually.
Okay.
The next ones which were to come up was the Shimla one and the Ooty one.
Okay.
The Metropolitan Ooty came up around 1908. The Shimla one came up around 1903.
Okay.
So that was actually the summer capital of the Viceroy.
Right.
So that gained priority. That Shimla had to be connected by train so that the administrative machinery can be moved to Shimla easily.
Comfortably. Yeah.
Yes, comfortably. So Calcutta was the capital at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That time, that is why you had the Kalka Mail.
Okay.
The Kalka Mail is one of the oldest trains of the East Indian Railway.
So that connects Howrah to Kalka.
Yes. So the Viceroy used to travel in his saloon up to Kalka and in the Kalka Mail, and then they used to have another saloon attached to the train which used to take him from Kalka right up to Shimla. And not just the Viceroy, I mean the Viceroy's advisors, the entire bureaucracy had, at least a large part of the bureaucracy had to move to Shimla at that time. This was an interesting thing, and then Ooty was connected, and Ooty's design, the technique which was used, the rack and pinion method, again is an innovation. I will get you the name. I forget the name of the Swiss innovator who designed this rack and pinion method of construction of railway line. It was a Swiss innovator who, because rack and pinion prevented the train from rolling back on a huge gradient.
Okay.
When you are accelerating,
okay,
on a gradient, there is a danger of the train rolling back.
Rolling back. Okay.
Yes, and so this rack and the pinion used to prevent it.
Okay, so it will put a pin behind so that it doesn't.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. So and it enabled a smooth journey up the Nilgiri hills from Metupalayam. So it's also one of the very scenic railways which we have. And then the next one which came up, the fourth one which came up was the Matheran, Neral Matheran.
Okay, near Mumbai.
Which came up as a private line. Actually, it was a Parsi gentleman.
Okay.
I'll get you the name. It's there on my list, but I can't.
That's okay. That is Googleable.
Yeah, we can Google it. I think there was a Parsi businessman and a philanthropist who laid this railway line in 1907.
Okay.
So that was a small line. It was about 16 to 18 kilometer line which went from Neral right up to Matheran.
Okay.
I think now from Neral to there's another station called Aman Lodge. The line is, I think the railway service is suspended. From Aman Lodge to Matheran, the train service is running.
This is also a kind of hill rail.
COVID this thing, but it will ultimately run from Aman Lodge to Matheran. Yeah, telling me?
This is also a kind of hill railway, right? I have not.
This is a hill railway. This is certainly a hill railway.
Okay.
This is a hill railway, but yes, the gradients may not be as steep as the ones which we have in Darjeeling and Ooty, but it's certainly it's more of a gradual climb. So it is a smaller railway as well.
Right. Right.
And then the last one which came up incidentally after independence.
Okay.
Was the Kangra Valley railway line. I mean, in fact, there's a foundation by Lal Bahadur Shastri, our railway minister. When he was a railway minister, he laid the or rather, he opened the railway line at that time.
Okay.
In 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
That was the line which took us from Pathankot to Joginder Nagar.
Joginder Nagar. Yes.
Via Palampur. In fact, it's also one of the very scenic railway lines because it goes through the lovely Kangra Valley.
Yes.
I have seen some photographs of the Palampur station, how it looks very scenic. You see the snow-capped peaks in the background.
Yes.
This train going through the photographs are, actually they transport you to a different world. Actually,
Yes, it is one of those railway lines which is yet on my wish list. You know, I've
yes,
been on
yes.
most
I
of
think
the
it should
others,
be
but
it
I
should
have
be on
not.
everyone's bucket list. I think everyone should travel by that railway line and then go up to at least Kanpur, which is an excellent, beautiful hill station over there.
Great,
These are the
great.
ones, and the hill railways. So you can broadly divide our this thing into um, lines laid by the private companies. There are lines which have been laid by the government. Then you have the princely states which have laid these railway lines, and you have the hill railways as well.
Oh,
Kind of these the mix of all these the railway lines which have been laid by these agencies, whether it's the government or whether it's by the railway companies or whether it's by the government or anyone, they form what is our the heritage component of our railways. So we have a pretty composite railway heritage as well.
yes.
Each princely state or each company had its own way of had its own culture or had its own way of laying the lines. That makes the entire thing very interesting.
It is so fascinating that what started as these sprouts all over the country finally became one of the strongest networks connecting the country.
Yes, and these were formed primarily, ultimately they were formed for transporting troops for military purposes,
Right.
strategic purposes, and for also transporting the raw material to the ports. So ultimately, the basic purpose was both strategic and for exporting the goods to England.
To me, the business looks like the biggest driver.
Business, actually, it was a drain of wealth. I mean, what we refer to, or what even Mr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Shashi Tharoor has spoken in his book about the drain of wealth. It was the railway lines which enabled the drain of wealth from India to be taken to Britain.
Right.
But the thing is, whereas the railway network expanded, they obviously benefited the Indians as well.
Yes, that is a debate that will continue. But the fact is that today the Indian Railways is an integral part of an Indian's life. We have, it's the most romantic way to travel. We, especially those of us who grew up in 80s, 90s during our student days, we have some beautiful memories of traveling on long distance trains. It's a part of our Indian life today. We cannot imagine an India without Indian Railways today. So to that extent, and thank you so much for taking us on this beautiful journey across India through the history of Indian Railways and heritage. I have lots of questions for you, but I guess we'll have to invite you again for another session to take us to different museums and different things.
There are lots of stories about these, how these railway lines were laid. Of course, we also should maybe later on talk about the museum network which is there on Indian Railways as well, and how railway tourism itself can be a separate element of tourism, and we should work on how we can encourage tourism through railways. What ideas can be generated to ensure that we boost the tourism sector through the medium
In
of
fact,
railway.
I'm going to take this opportunity to ask my listeners to ask questions, and we will share those questions with Anantji, because he's in a position where he can potentially take it to the people who can make a difference. So if you have any suggestions for Indian Railways, if you have any ideas that you think Indian Railways should implement, please leave them in the comments and we'll try to send them to the right people. Thank you so much, Anantji. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much,
talking to you.
Anuradha. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on Detours. You can also join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Our handle is Inditales, INDITALES. See you soon.